Doctors Without Borders.
Hello, Summer Games Done Quick 2023. Welcome back, and thank you so much for tuning in. I have with me Deb Garcia from Doctors Without Borders, the Director of Development, in fact. Very recent Director of Development, as I understand it. Thank you so much for joining me, Deb.
Thanks for having us.
So you are the Director of Development for MSF USA. What does that role really entail?
That role is, my role is really about engaging the American public and converting them to donors and basically engaging them, making sure that our donors have the best possible donor experience. They understand the work. They're brought as close to our work and our movement as possible. They're actually a core part of our movement. MSF is a global organization with a huge footprint, and we're basically making sure that humanitarian aid is where it's needed most.
Yeah, so what does like a day-to-day look like for you, if you can even describe one? Because I never get my 9 to 5 looks like this every day from anybody that I've interviewed from Doctors Without Borders.
Yeah, so day-to-day, everything changes because it's humanitarian aid. You never know. We're doing emergency response, and you just don't know what the next day is going to be like. But the core of what we do is really focusing on our patients, making sure that healthcare is delivered, in a timely manner. We have like a 50-year history of doing this. So when we raise funds, my team raises funds in the U.S. The U.S. is the largest philanthropic market in the world.
Wow.
But it's a big market. It's like 330 million people, 4 million of which are all donors. And so our work is really to identify donors who would be interested, passionate about our work, and they, make sure that they're recurring donors. They're committed and engaged.
So why, you are actually a brand new member to MSF, as I mentioned. I believe March of this year is when you started as Director of Development. What drew you to working with MSF?
So I started my career as an engineer. I worked as an engineer for 5 years doing large-scale equipment design to manufacture vaccines. After that, I worked in pharmaceuticals, doing management consulting, and mostly to Big Pharma, but also to the Gates Foundation. Through my work with the Gates Foundation, I became really passionate about global health access and volunteered for a bit in Nigeria. While I was in Nigeria, visited IDP camps and camps with internally displaced people, and returned to the US and became really involved in women's health issues. I would say in 2020 with COVID, it was the first time that I personally felt like I didn't have, like so many people in America, right? Didn't have access to care or had to, the healthcare system all of a sudden was not what we're used to.
Yeah, it's very different.
Very, very different. You're going from environments where we're used to having second opinions, or, if you have a lot of choices on who you see, you're as a patient, you're kind of empowered really locally in the US. In the environments that we serve, when a patient goes to see a doctor, a nurse, a midwife, they just see whoever is there. It's the doctor.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think in 2020, like so many Americans, it was the first time with COVID that I was kind of found myself personally in a vulnerable state. And so the appreciation for MSF just grew. And seriously, this is like a dream job to be able to represent an organization with such a long history of doing what's right and serving patients.
Yeah. Oh, what would you say, since you've been brought on, has been a surprise, challenge for you in the role that maybe you weren't expecting, or what has been maybe a positive surprise for you since joining?
Yeah, so I would say in the last few years, there have been significant amount of emergencies, right? There's been Ukraine, COVID, Turkey, Syria earthquake. There's just a significant appreciation for the needs, like humanitarian need.
Right.
Globally, the world is becoming a smaller place. So we've had a lot of solid, increase in donor count and fundraising off the back of emergencies. But much of our work is actually not well known, right?
Yeah.
In terms of so much of what we do is underreported, unreported. We're doing work in Yemen. Right now, we're doing significant work in Sudan that's not really covered in the same way that, thing. But I would say making sure the biggest challenge for me is making sure that our work that is underreported, which is much of our work, right? It's the vast majority of our work that is underreported is funded, right? Because the model is like we raise money here, or it's a global movement. I have their counterparts in other countries raising funds, and we then pool the funds, and then our program staff and operational partners are basically redistributing funds where they're necessary and needed most.
Right, because I think it's very easy for people now to, as you mentioned, we've had so many kind of major events happen, and it's easy to understand that financial support is necessary to aid these events as they happen, but they're happening all year, all the time. It's having reaction, funds just being reactionary rather than stable can, I'm sure, be extremely difficult to plan around, difficult to work around.
Exactly. And, when you have to be ready and funded for the emergency.
Yeah,
you can't be then going out fundraise. Exactly.
Starts.
Because every hour counts.
Yeah.
Every day. You know what I mean? We have to be ready, poised to respond. And we really are. We're working in 70 countries, so we understand the landscape. 90% of our staff, like on the ground, are locally hired staff. So we're actually providing culturally competent care, which is super important. It improves outcomes. It just allows us to engage patients and treat our patient population with dignity, and give the kind of even though it's oftentimes a completely chaotic environment. Doctors Without Borders, you're thinking Doctors Without Borders, and it's not just doctors, it's, everything, all the different roles that you need to operate a healthcare facility in an environment, oftentimes, where there are not the utilities and so forth in place. So we're talking about, people putting together generators to provide electricity. You're talking about water supply, everything. We have these kits that we send out. And so to put together healthcare systems to operate in completely compromised environments.
Yeah, we have the luxury over here of knowing, okay, I'm going to walk into a building and they're going to have running water.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
going to be able to wash my hands very easily or something, and that might be something that actually needs to be implemented, figured out. How is that going to happen in these various countries? I never knew that it was 90% of doctors are local. I hear Doctors Without Borders, I think of you load up a plane with a plane full of doctors and we ship them out to where they need to be and you drop them like the emergency drop supplies and stuff. But no, it's great, and I'm sure it helps in the ability to respond very quickly to things.
Exactly. And the majority of staff, like I said, are locally hired staff, and it's not just doctors, it's nurses, it's not only just clinicians, it's also just, people who need to make sure that everybody the patient would encounter, as well as people who the patient don't encounter, but are putting together the infrastructure in place.
Yeah. So now I know we've spoken to a lot of members from Doctors Without Borders in the past, and sometimes people have had experience going out and working on a project themselves or in the field. As I understand, you're very new still, but you're excited to take your first trip out into the field soon. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've got coming up?
Yeah, so this is my first trip. So I'm really happy to be here and be with this community, because this is like a really important community and partnership for us.
You picked a good first trip. So it's not quite 2023. But
it does feel really good. It feels awesome to be here. And my first trip is actually going to be, which is awesome for me because of my engineering background, going to our logistics center. One of them, we have a few internationally, and it's kind of like, my understanding is like almost like a big IKEA shop, right? But with all of the things necessary to put together a healthcare delivery center, a hospital, right? An inflatable hospital. And so I'm really excited to get out there and see. We also do a bit of training. So I will be trained while I'm out there, so that when I actually go to the field, I'm able to do something of use. I'm not just spinning, because for us, that's not the model. The model is basically, once you're on the ground, it's an emergency response environment. You have to be, prepared to do something of use for the patient.
There's no traveling to, these locations just for, glamour shots or PR shots. Like, you're there, you're helping.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No, we have too much respect for our donor funds to do things like that.
Well, thank you so much for having respect for those funds. As somebody who has donated in the past and
Thank
encouraged
you.
lots of our folks at home to donate. Deb, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I wish we had more time to dig into more about MSF's mission and whatnot, but I would encourage people to go and just Google Doctors Without Borders or doctorswithoutborders.org, I believe, will get you to the website where you can also learn a lot more about MSF's mission. Deb, thank you again so much.
Hey, Hobbs, thanks so much for having us.
All right, folks, we are going to get back to the speed run, so thanks again, and keep watching Summer Games Done Quick 2023.
Welcome back, everyone. We have a $25 donation from Noah Runs that says, "Can't wait to see N++ get destroyed. Let's get those hard levels." Yes, let's get those. We only have a couple of games left before that incentive cuts off, which, speaking of, we are ready to go into Dangun Feveron Arcade by Klex. Go ahead.